Flip Clock fans. I was traveling about southern Indiana this week and I stumbled upon this field with a lot of old stuff in it. And I saw this car and I thought, you know, that looks like about a 1950 car. So I asked some people on Reddit and they came back and told me that's probably a 1950-1952 Crosley station wagon. And I'd never heard of Crosley. Well, what's this got to do with flip clocks? Well, let's find out. The Crosley was a fine car and it was made in Cincinnati, Ohio from about 1939 to 1952. And we'll find out later how a 50s car has anything at all to do with this clock. What this is, as you may know if you've seen any of the other videos, it's a Köhler Flip Clock. It's a clock from Germany. I believe it is a clock that really got the modern flip clock craze going. It's been hidden in history for a while. But we're also going to talk today about how a lot of things from flip clock history can be messed up. Well, let's talk about who made this clock. This is Wilhelm Köhler. He was born in 1863 in Berlin, and he established the Uhrenfabrik Laufamholz Köhler Company in 1906. Now, Uhrenfabrik means clock factory, and Laufamholz is a place. So we know something about this clock. It was produced in Laufamholz. Well, Laufamholz is a municipality of Nuremberg, so you can impress your friends with that. The original clocks that look like this one came from Nuremberg, Germany. Well, we're going to dive into this clock a little bit, and again, we're going to expose some logical fallacies or mistakes we've made over the years. Well, you see, that looks like brass, but it's actually metal painted, brass colored, and you can see that where the winder is here. It's kind of a rim winder, and people's fingers have rubbed that off. Now you notice it says Köhler and it says Germany. So a lot of people online have been trying to tell me that, well, that had to be from before 1949. And they've said as much in their listings on eBay. Well, we know something from World War II, that after the defeat of Nazi Germany by the Berlin Declaration of 5 June 1945, the four governments of the United States, Soviet Union, United Kingdom, France, acting on behalf of the Allies of World War II, jointly assumed supreme authority over Germany. Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones for administrative purposes. The United States, United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union had their part. This was ratified at the Potsdam Conference in August of 1945. West Germany was created in 1949 when the United States, Great Britain, and France consolidated the zones that they had occupied. The Soviet Union retained their influence over East Germany until West and East Germany were reunited in 1990. So we can use some logic here. If the clock says made in Germany or Germany, it had to have been made before 1949, before Germany was split into West and East Germany, or after 1990 when the country was reunified. Logically. While this logic is used extensively on eBay and many other places online, the fascinating thing is that it's not true. There was no mandate that West Germany products had to be labeled as such. In fact, West Germans considered themselves to be the true Germany. On many clocks from 1949 to 1990, you will find made in Germany, Germany, or West Germany, or even a combination of these, and clocks that are known to have been made in West Germany. While you can be certain that an item labeled West Germany was made between 1949 and 1990, you cannot use the logic in reverse. Now, that's something that you'll see online with not just clocks, but a lot of items, and it's a very common logical error. And you see down here there's a screw. It's a real long-headed screw, and there's going to be one at the top right there. So those 2 screws have to come out to get this mechanism out. So we want to get a closer look at this clock. It's also going to be very interesting when we find out the connection with automobiles from the 1950s. So what we're going to do is we'll take that out there, take these 2 screws out, and push this mechanism out so we can get a closer look. Now, when I was looking at this clock, I was thinking about that unique logo, and I wanted to find out more about it. So I was getting online, and I found out that Köhler, the same company, actually made a lot of dash clocks. These are clocks, that wind-up clocks that you would pop in a pod on your dash or in the steering wheel. Now, some of these are priced extremely high, $2,000, $3,000. I've seen them $200, $300. I thought, man, that is interesting. And then all of a sudden, this Köhler clock pops up for $25 and $8 shipping. What in the world? And this guy says, happy bidding, good luck. But it was a buy it now. And I thought, well, that's weird. He said the clock does not work. It would wind, but it would not work. Well, that's kind of crazy. But thing was, it was a buy it now. So I'm not sure why he was wishing good luck. So I bought it. So here it is in Flip Clock Fan Studios. It says, Köhler, 1 jewel. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this apart. And what we're going to find out is that it's very, very similar. The mechanism is very similar and maybe identical to the Köhler Flip Clock. There's the ring there. That's the winding ring. That's how you wind it. Now here's how I fixed it. That's it. That's how I fixed it. That's how I got the clock running. Hard to believe, isn't it? And I'll show you in a minute. We'll take this apart and I'll show you how I fixed this or why that made the clock start running. And it hasn't stopped since I got it. And it says Köhler. There's that logo. Now Köhler is funny. That means charcoal burner in Germany. So if you try to translate Köhler, you'll get real confused because that's a person's last name. And you can see how we're going to take this apart. There's the bezel there, the chrome bezel. And I have to turn it sort of like a medicine bottle to get to those ridges there, or the cutouts there to where that'll lift off. Now, it was hard the first time I took this apart, and it's really hard to get back together. Okay, here we got a beveled piece of real glass. And we're just going to push this out of its casing here. That ring kind of keeps the glass in place. And there we see, there's our clockworks. You can see the balance wheel going back and forth. I'm going to stop it here. It takes a while to stop. And that's the state the clock was in when the guy had it and when he shipped it to me. Now maybe it needed a little oiling or a little help, but that's all I did to get it started. I didn't have to do it but once. So here we see, it says Germany. Of course we know it was made in West Germany, and we know that it was made near Nuremberg, or in a municipality of Nuremberg called Laufamholz. Now, Köhler, it's kind of interesting that it says 8 Tage. It actually says 8 Tage, which means 8 days. That's 8-day winding. That's what that means. The mechanism you wind, it'll go for 8 days, supposedly. But Köhler Company is kind of interesting. They made dash clocks for cars in the 50s, and some famous car makers. You see you're going to push this mechanism out this way. I'm pushing through the window, but I think if you adjust the can, you can get it out. But they also made clocks for aircraft, Luftwaffe aircraft. So they made armaments for Nazi Germany. They also supposedly used forced labor. That's what the history books say about this company. I did not know that until recently. If you look in the can there, you can see it's painted metal as well. And it seems they were doing some welding in there or some soldering in. They didn't bother to fix that mess in there. And it's no account. It doesn't hurt anything. And we'll get this piece of plastic out, this piece of acrylic. It's curved. Probably a good thing it's acrylic. It's held up well, not too many scratches. And there's that, probably some like flux or something like that when they were doing the soldering. I don't feel any need to take that apart. There's no reason to take that apart, so I'm not going to chance any mess ups. We're going to go ahead and take this housing cover off here. There's just 2 small screws to do that. And you got to watch because there's a little handle here, and that's how you adjust these clocks. That little handle there on that balance wheel that was going back and forth. The spring that does that is called a hairspring, and this will either tighten or loosen that hairspring to either speed up or slow down the clock. So there's our mechanism. It looks a lot like the dash clock. Again, and I'm so lucky to have gotten that clock because I would have had no idea. Off it goes. I always like the clock works in these things. And there's some brass here, but again, a lot of these components are painted metal, and that's okay. But the clock mechanisms are obviously brass. And it's a nice clock. It really is. It's well made. It flips nice. It's been keeping good time, and it's a fairly quiet flipper. That's how you wind it. Same as the dash clock we saw earlier. And those dash clocks, you would have found them in 50s automobiles. Maybe not the Crosley we talked about, but that's your connection if you're wondering. Kind of interesting to have a clock in your dash that you had to pop out and wind every now and then. There's that little handle holding it from springing back. So there we have it. And you look here and say, oh yeah, there's Germany, and we know it was West Germany, and we know it was Laufamholz, right? That's where they made these. Logically, it's in the name. But is that right? Well, Uhrenfabrik Laufamholz, as we know, made German armaments. They became a target in World War II. They were actually destroyed in a bombing raid in August 28th of 1943. Wilhelm Köhler got to see his life's work destroyed. So when the American occupation forces said they could rebuild, they went from Nuremberg and took an hour's trip west, probably get away from the war damage, and they ended up in Bernheim, Germany. So that's where the clock factory was reestablished, and that's where this flip clock would have been built. So that's something kind of surprising, isn't it? When you think you've got everything figured out and something is just obvious, it's not so much. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little look at checking ourselves when it comes to flip clock history. Well, thanks for taking the time.